Hello, and welcome to Real Film Snobs. I'm Angela Yeager. I am pleased to present two special guests here with me this episode, Joey Bauer and Caitlin Stow from Dark Side Cinema in Corvallis. Welcome to the show, Joey and Caitlin.
Thank
Thank you, Angela.
you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited. This is my first time getting to have you both on the show. And even though I've seen you many times at the theater, so Dark Side Cinema is one of my home away from home, along with Salem Cinema in Salem. Dark Side has been, a place for art house theater lovers for many years, and I've been doing private screenings there during COVID. So I get to talk to Joey when I get out of the theater because I'm like have all these ideas in my head about the movie I just saw, and super excited to have you both on. Maybe just start off the show by telling viewers a little bit about yourselves and how maybe you got into got into film, like how you became interested in film and where and how you got to be where you are today.
Caitlin, go ahead.
Okay. Well, when I was first in college, I was not a film major, but I found myself ignoring all my homework to just watch movies and think about them. And so after a year of doing terribly in my non-film classes, I decided maybe it was time to go for something I actually enjoyed. So I left school and I've been sort of teaching myself filmmaking and film theory ever since. I'm back in school now. I'm a cinema studies major, senior at University of Oregon, and I work here and I make movies. So my whole life has become film now.
That's awesome. Are you thinking you're going to, with your cinema studies major, like make films, or what are you wanting to do with that?
I'd like to do both. I'd like to make films, but I'd also like to teach. I'd like to be a professor as well. And I'm starting a YouTube channel to do like film analysis, in-depth film analysis essays. So sort of anything and everything. Yeah.
Well, you know who you can always have on as a guest. So
Yeah.
yeah, we can collaborate between the two shows. So yeah, Joey, what about you?
I started watching movies at a very young age. I kind of grew up in front of a TV. I remember the first time I saw The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. I was 5 years old at my aunt's house, and that's a long movie. And I sat in front of the TV the whole time. I was just totally
Wow.
mesmerized. And so my love of it just sort of grew from there. Watching Betamax tapes at my grandma's house of Dick Tracy and Funny Farm with Chevy Chase, and it just never stopped. I just growing up, my family had a massive VHS collection, and I was consumed by movies, and I am still consumed by movies. It's really all I think about, and I have a wife and two children at home, and yet I just still think about movies all the time.
I'm with
I love
you.
my family dearly, but yes, movies is it's a part of me. So
I feel like that's one of the reasons when I started going to dark side, especially when I started getting to interact with both of you, I just felt like it's hard, when you're a film person the way we are. A lot of people don't understand the idea of living and breathing movies the way we do, and so it's like you find true kindred souls on this planet occasionally, and you two are definitely two of those for me. So and
absolutely.
I love that you're filming in the theater today. So if people haven't seen the Dark Side Cinema, it's a truly a gem in Corvallis. It's just a place you feel at home. During COVID, you guys took all the precautions, and I just felt very safe there. So really appreciate that about you. And I love that you just bring wonderful, quirky films to your theater, as well as occasionally some mainstream films right now, like John Wick. So
Yeah.
that's a lot of fun. So we're going to kick it off with our first film, which is showing right now at both the Dark Side and at Salem Cinema. It's an art house film called Return to Seoul by director Davy Chow. And it film revolves around Freddie, a French woman who ends up going to South Korea kind of on a whim, but then ends up looking up trying to find her biological parents. This film is really anchored by an amazing performance, I thought, by first time actor Ji-min Park, who I just thought she just did an amazing job in the movie. I had no idea it was her first film until I looked up more about this movie after I saw it, because I would have thought she was a seasoned actress. It's a really tough role to play because her character, Freddie, is not always the most likable character. She's a person who's a little rough around the edges, but that's what I loved about her. She is someone who has gone through some trauma in her life because of the fact she's kind of living in these two worlds and never really feeling at home in either of them. And so it's really about her quest for identity and belonging. She's very much a French woman in some ways, and when she goes to South Korea, she finds herself at odds with some of the kind of patriarchal practices there and just some of the cultural differences. But you can also tell she's not really fully at home either in France. And then there's this idea of kind of facing the trauma of being given up by your birth parents as well, and then her interactions with her birth father, which I think are some of the most poignant scenes in the film. um, because of all this, she's really kind of put this like fence around herself where she does not want to let anyone in or get close to anyone. And a lot of the film is exploring her journey through a period of time. I just saw this movie yesterday and I was absolutely blown away by it. I can see why it's receiving all the critical acclaim it is. And I really think her performance, to me, is one of the best performances of the year. So I'm anxious to hear what you both thought of it.
I just watched it about half an hour ago is when it ended, so it's very fresh in my mind. I I agree with everything you said, Angela, about it. I thought it was fantastic. I could not take my eyes off of Freddie, and the fact that that was her first role. I always appreciate when you see something so strong from an actor and it's their first role. It's like, okay, this is really impressive. um I also found it to be just kind of devastating in the way that she did have that fence around her, and she was self-sabotaging herself the whole film. And
Hmm.
there's a lot of these questions of like, why are you doing this, and they never answer those questions. And I think that it's a smart choice to do that. You don't always need to have those answers given to you, because couldn't she didn't have the courage to find those answers herself. And
Hmm.
I thought that was a really nice touch to the film. I also loved the fact that music was used as a device for her
Yeah.
to go away from her issues, from her problems. Every time something was brought up and she was sort of forced to reflect on it, she would go to the DJ in the vinyl bar and put on a dance record, and she would dance to it. Or in the beginning of the film, she would pull all of those people from the restaurant to one table to get
Hmm.
away from the questions that she was being asked. And I've seen that in real life from people, so I appreciated seeing it on screen that way. I had never really seen it done that way before, and it was just sad, especially the end. The end was so sad. And again, she sits down at the piano and plays music after this realization that she's totally alone in the world and it's
Hmm.
from her own doing. And yet there she goes to sit at the piano and play a piece to sort of forget about what just happened. So I thought it was fantastic. I loved it.
I
Caitlin?
agree with you. I do think that the ending was not sad though. I think that the ending was hopeful and happy and progress for her, because she spends the whole movie essentially using confidence to hide.
Mm-hmm.
She every time she, like you said, she's confronted with questions in that opening scene, and starts interacting with new people to avoid the questions. But throughout the whole movie, she makes these very odd, brash, like uncomfortable decisions, but they're all in an effort to mask her insecurity with like overwhelming confidence and control and taking over a space to make it exactly how she wants it. And she mentions, at the beginning, oh, I used to do piano, I used to be a musician or whatever. And then she's so moved by her dad using the same medium that she used to wrest control of his situation. So that there's sort of that comparison, that she moved away from piano and started seizing control in these really toxic ways. And then he found piano to bring control into his life. And so at the end, I feel like, yes, it's devastating, how her interpersonal relationships pan out, but she's thinking about leaving, she's thinking about seizing control in her old way of moving,
Mhm.
of like not resting and not sitting in it, but instead she returns to the piano, this thing that's a much less toxic way of like gaining control again over her emotional situation. So I thought that was beautiful.
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
think, yeah, no, go ahead, Angela.
oh, I was just gonna say, I think the ending can be interpreted. It's interesting to see, Joey saying it's really tragic, and then you're saying it, and I was mixed on it. I was because I felt like the scene in the bathroom right before she gets to the piano is really devastating,
It is,
and
yeah.
then when she gets to the piano, but and she's getting back to not just music but also sight reading, which really brings the movie full
Right.
circle from that beginning,
Mhm.
where she talks about the importance of sight reading. Right, I think that you find that I felt there was a glimmer of hope, but she is very much alone as well again, and maybe that's the journey she's chosen in a way is to be a solitary person. I don't know, but yeah, go ahead, say what were you going to say, Caitlin.
I also think I think the thing I appreciated about it most, I did have some issues with it. I found my mind wandering in the middle.
Mm.
It was a little slow, just a tad too slow for me. But what I think is both its great success and its great downfall is its specificity. It's like that's what I loved and sort of found frustrating about it, is that this is someone's personal experience, and there's just moments that you can't access because of that. But like that's
Mhm.
also what makes it beautiful, that it's so personal and so specific that it's like people don't really often you don't find movies that are that specific. And every moment seems to be emotional and personal and saying something, whether you can understand what it's saying or not, it's saying something and that it's going for something. But I also like how it tackles this very hot topic right now of interracial and international adoption. And there's like everyone's debating the pros and cons pretty openly in cultural forums right now. And I think it really tackled the nuance of it without making like a statement of like good or bad, which is unhelpful anyway. But I think it really shows like how emotionally complicated it is and how you can't just like write it off as one thing or the other. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, exactly. Because in her case, it's not good or bad, right?
Yeah.
It's a mixed bag. So we
Yeah.
see that directly from her. And her character says some really awful things. The scene in the taxi or the with the boyfriend, when
Mhm.
Yeah.
she says the thing that she says to him, which I won't repeat because I don't want to give it away from you. My friend who joined me for my private screen, she's like, I cannot imagine someone saying that to me. Like, but the fact that the actress pulls that off and you don't dislike her because you understand that she is coming from this place of just profound insecurity. Like you said, Caitlin, like she's very insecure and she's masking that in a lot of ways by just being like, everyone is disposable to me, like again, she just reminds me of this person that's put up this wall around her that, yeah, I really found it phenomenal. So I definitely recommend it for people, especially if you like character pieces, movies about identity or belonging. Also beautifully shot, great
Mhm.
performance, and I really liked the music as well. So a lot of positives there. So for this episode, I asked both Caitlin and Joey to recommend one of their favorite films of all time that they wanted to review. And I rewatched these so I could get to talk to you about them. Both of these I'd seen before, but it had been a while. So go ahead, Caitlin, with your first film.
So a film that I absolutely love is The Haunting from 1963. It's directed by Robert Wise. And it stars Julie Harris as Eleanor. And she is a very, say naive, I suppose is the best word, woman who's been taking care of her ailing mother for however long. It seems like forever. The movie kind of paints it as like that's been her life. She's just been taking care of her ailing mother. Her mother has finally died. And so she's sort of stuck. She doesn't know what her life means now. And so she gets invited to a project by Dr. John Markway, who's played by Richard Johnson. And he has invited a group of people to stay in a famously haunted house overnight to study sort of supernatural occurrences. And she just decides to go for it we're not really sure why until further into the movie. But once she gets there, there's a small group of people. We learn that most of the people invited have chickened out, and there's only 4 of them now that are going to stay in the house. Another woman named Theodora, played by Claire Bloom, and then a cynic who is meant to inherit the house soon and wants to make sure that they don't do anything wrong to it, played by Russ Tamlin, and he's one of my favorite parts of the movie. I love him. But it's a really cool movie because it's just like you can read it and you can like see all of the messages and the underlying things, and the character work is stunning, but it's also just kind of a atmospheric, kind of goofy old horror movie. So you can like watch it either way, and it works beautifully either way. You can kind of laugh at the like overacting and some of the dated effects, which are still really cool, but you can also watch it very seriously and really appreciate the art. And I love movies that ride that line, that can be one or the other. So yeah, I love it mostly for the character work. I think it's really cool that in 1963 there are these two female characters in this movie that are both incredibly thought out, incredibly detailed, incredibly layered, and they're completely different from each other, but they don't feel like caricatures. And even though they are kind of at odds sometimes, they're not like pitted against each other. They're just two women with differing opinions, and but they also care for each other, and it's just beautiful. And they really are allowed to have center stage, and the male characters are there, and they're important and they contribute, but they're not the point. And I thought that was just so forward for 1963, especially for a movie that seems so unassuming. You know, it's like, oh, goofy horror movie, but then there's these beautifully constructed characters in there. I also think the cinematography is stunning. It's in black and white, and it's a huge inspiration for my own work. I love the deep focus in it. It's just lovely. Yeah, I mean, I could just go on and on, but the special effects are so cool. I love the use of mirrors. It's just everything about it is amazing.
Would say for people who are used to modern horror, this film is not really, it's not a gotcha horror, you know,
No.
it's like an atmospheric, it slowly builds. It's more about the tension. And it's, I would almost term it as a psychological horror as well, which I thought was interesting when I was looking up some things about this movie. It's based on The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. And originally Robert Weiss, the director and the writer, went to visit her because they were really kind of going full into with the script originally, that it was all in the one character's mind, you know, like she is going insane. And then Shirley Jackson's like, no, no, that was not my intention with the book. It's supposed to be supernatural. Like there is something really going on. And they were like, but they decided to leave like layers of that in there. And that actually makes it a better movie because you're not quite sure, you know, if it actually is real or not, if it is in her mind or, and so then leaving it more ambiguous, I think is what makes the movie really good.
Mhm.
So, and
Yeah.
also I just have wanted to add that Robert Wise, this is the film he started working on this when he was in post production for West Side Story. So talk about just like a director went, you know, just like completely different type of movie altogether, but also amazing photography once again. So Joey, what do you
Yeah,
want?
I watched it for the first time the other day, and two main criteria for me when I watch a film is if it has great atmosphere. Everything else can fall by the wayside. If it has great atmosphere, then it's fantastic. This film has everything about it, is so atmospheric. I loved it for that. But again, like Caitlin said, it's really smart and it's really layered, and it cares about its characters and it cares about its audience. And the great thing about this movie is 1963, it's a haunted house movie, right? So probably a lot of audience back in the day, they're like, oh, is this going to be another William Castle thing where skeletons are flying out of the auditorium on the ceiling? Is my seat gonna start shaking or whatever?
Yeah.
But it's not one of those. And I think for that it was really courageous, because it showed you something different than not just like a schlocky B movie. It was actually really sophisticated. Yes, there are some silly moments, but overall, from start to finish, it's just really well paced and it's really smart. And if you were to take it and put it in today's world, the same thing, like the same exact product, people would be eating it up. It has the ambiguity that people love about the term. Is it's a unfortunate term, but elevated horror. So people would respect it for being an elevated horror film in today's standards.
Unfortunately, they did remake it.
They did, yes.
Yeah, and the remake is awful, and so I don't
It
recommend
is.
the remake. They did everything wrong. They did everything
Yes.
against what you just said, Joey. They left all the atmosphere out, and they just went for pure schlocky
Yep.
jump scares and really loud, special effects, sounds, and yeah, the remake is horrible.
Don't watch the remake, but yes, watch the Robert Wise version. But yeah, I loved it, start to finish. It was wonderful, and it was filled with dread and filled with fear and filled with anxiety, and it just worked. Everything worked.
And I
I
love
feel
that
I
both of your picks are so different. Go ahead. Sorry, Caitlin.
Oh, I just feel I would be remiss if I didn't shout out that one reason I love it is that it's one of the oldest queer movies that I've seen. It's the fact that it's got, even though she's not open, but it's not subtle either. Like she is a lesbian, and I think that's very cool for 1963.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll move on to Joey's pick, which I'm also very excited. Very different type of pick. Also kind of though in not exactly horror, but anyway, go ahead, Joey. I'll let you introduce it.
Sure. River's Edge, 1986, directed by Tim Hunter. Wonderful cast. Keanu Reeves, one of his earlier roles. Crispin Glover is probably the best part about that film. It's funny because people say that they get turned off from the film because of his character, but I think he's fantastic. He's the crutch that's trying to hold everything together. It's a movie based on a true story about a high school kid who kills his girlfriend, and he shows his friends the dead body, and no one really cared. No one really told the police about it. It was just another day in suburbia. And what River's Edge offers is that unfortunate portrait of sort of misled youth, or not even misled, just bored youth, youth that doesn't know what its future looks like. You know, their parents grew up in post-war, you know, glory days, and what do they have to look forward to? They're not sure. And so the film revolves around a character who kills his girlfriend, and he shows the body off to his friends, and no one cares. That's the whole thing. It's very nihilistic in a way, and it shows the dangers of just being complacent. And it is in a way a horror film, because what happens is disturbing, and why isn't anyone doing anything about it? And that question is never really answered. But again, going back to the Crispin Glover character, he's trying to figure out a way to make it so everyone comes out okay, even when those that committed the crime, he wants that person to be okay too. But it's all sort of convoluted, the thinking of all these characters, and I just find it fascinating. The feel of it, the look of it, it's just a great 80s time capsule, and I think about it all the time. It's probably in my top 5 favorite films, but I just love every single aspect of it.
I saw this movie in the 90s, so not in the 80s, but I was a teenager in the 90s, and I saw it. And I was telling Joey before we start taping that I was going through a Keanu Reeves phase where I just went back and watched all of his films before I knew him, right? And this was one of his early performances, and he's great in the character he plays. His character and Ione Skye's character are kind of bound together by the fact they're the two people that are the most kind of at ease. They're not activist characters. They're definitely not trying to do, but they are the most ill at ease with Crispin Glover's plan to like make everyone not talk about it, right? They're like,
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't we be bothered by this? Like they're kind of like not, it's not sitting well with them. But at the time, I remember thinking, holy smokes, this is really dark. Like even for the 90s, when I was watching movies like Heathers, I thought this movie is really dark for a teen movie. And then today, you know, I was looking up some historical information about the movie. It's still considered one of the darkest teen movies ever made. So it still lives on in infamy that way. So I actually love this. I've seen it a few times, and I watched it when I was in film school at OSU. Caitlin, speaking of it, with John Lewis did a film, a class on teen films, and he talks a lot about teen ennui and kind of this idea, you know, of the teen malaise and
Mm-hmm.
that feeling. And this film captures that perfectly, right? So, and a lot of people, you forgot, Dennis Hopper is also in the movie, and the scenes with
Yeah.
Dennis Hopper and Crispin Glover, because like Dennis Hopper was like the Crispin Glover of his day, like this unhinged weirdo guy who you never know exactly what he's going to do. And then you put Crispin Glover in a scene with him, and you still to this day, even though I'd seen this movie together, when I saw them together, I was like, what are they going to do? Because they're so
Mm-hmm.
both such unhinged actors. So Caitlin, I'm here curious to hear what you say.
Yeah, I have a huge fascination with movies about the sort of apathy of like Gen X. I really love the director Greg Araki, and he covers that as
Oh,
well.
yeah.
And I feel like this fits in with that. I mean, this is less gay than Greg Araki, but this fits in with that whole vibe of like just a whole generation of kids who were kind of almost raised not to care about anything, but there's energy. So I like the Crispin Glover character because he's in an atmosphere where he's been basically taught not to care about anything, but he's like a wound screw of energy. He just doesn't know where to put it. And so he like finds things to care about, but without an actual moral compass. And so he's just like latching on with like no real thought with this energy. And I think that's great. But yeah, I think it's cool. There's a conversation, a quick comment that Dennis Hopper makes to what's his name, Samson, the murderer. He makes a comment. And he says something. You were supposed to be better than me, he says. And I think that's really like, I feel like that's sort of what the film's about. It's like about like passing on the torch to a new generation without really like giving them anything to work with. Like, because Dennis Hopper is almost the most screwed up character in the movie, and he's telling this kid who's somehow more screwed up than he is, like, wait, why aren't you better than me? Even though he hasn't given him anything to work with. And obviously Dennis Hopper and this kid, they're not related. Like, Dennis Hopper doesn't actually owe him anything, but I feel like it's a conversation between generations and sort of a hopelessness within that conversation. So yeah, it's a tough watch, and I think the first time I watched it, I didn't love it quite as much. I was trying to read it too tightly, but I think you have to just like sit in it and feel the apathy and the sort of hopelessness, and that's the movie. Yeah.
And we didn't even talk about Keanu Reeves' little brother, who is also he's the next generation even, and he's also really screwed up. And we see Keanu's character modeling, he's, just kind of becoming this juvenile delinquent, really. I mean, because he also witnesses the body and also doesn't care. And so we're seeing that passed on again, even to another generation. And like in a lot of teen movies, the parents are almost entirely absent in this movie. You see the mom of Keanu Reeves a few times, and she's mostly just like yelling at her kids and looking kind of frenzied, and she's off to work or whatever. But she's got their dad as their stepdad, who obviously doesn't care for them. So you got the divorced generation too, kind of brought into that. So I found that really interesting. I think we're going to run out of time, so we're probably not going to get to our last movie, unfortunately, but I think that's okay because we have such great discussions about these movies. So we'll have to maybe save all the beauty and the bloodshed for another episode. But
can we just say that it's a fantastic film and everyone should see it?
Fantastic film. 5 stars.
5 stars.
5 stars.
Oh, I know we didn't get to that one, but I guess we have 1 minute, right, Brad? We have 1 minute. Okay, 1 minute review of All the Beauty and the Bloodshed. It's a Oscar nominated film about the career of artist Nan Goldin and her activism against the Sackler family, who are accountable for the opioid epidemic, done by the great documentarian Laura Poitras, who is really famous for doing the documentary about Edward Snowden. Please watch this movie. It's really great. It's really great portrayal of an artist, and it's a great portrayal of an artist turning into an activist. So that's my 5-second summary. And they say 5 stars.
5 stars. It's 2 films in one. It's angry, it's beautiful, it's sad, it's everything. I loved it. Go see it.
Yeah, and I got to see it because you showed it. Thank you. At the Dark Side Cinema. So I got to see it on the big screen. It is now showing on streaming on HBO. It is worth checking out. It is one of the best films of 2022. So please check it out. And thank you so much, Joey and Caitlin, for coming on the show. I hope you'll come back and that you enjoyed yourself, and you'll come back because I'd love to have you on again so we could talk more movie talk.
Absolutely.
So to wrap up, please subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Just hit that little subscribe bell and you'll get updates whenever we have a new episode. We also have a website, realfilmsnobs.com, and we're on Facebook. You can also watch us every week on CC Media, Scan TV in Silverton, and Corvallis Access Media in Corvallis, KMUZ Radio, and KMWV Radio, as well as on our podcast. I'd like to thank our fantastic crew, which is mainly Brad Wortman, and our sponsors. Thank you very much. And thank you to Joey and Caitlin. Have a great day and great movies. Bye-bye.